But let's not waste time. Let's get to the rude guest hotline. If it ain't rude, it ain't right. And talk to our guy, Albert Breer, SI and MMQB. So I saw an attribution to you, Albert, and I wanted to get you on to ask about this today, that you've been told the Commanders offered Ronnie Stanley, the left tackle who signed with the Ravens, for $20 million a year, 24 per, and he stayed in Baltimore for less money. What can you tell us about that?
Well, I can tell you that obviously they couldn't officially make an offer, but I know a couple of teams were at 24 or more, or were over 24 million per. I think the Commanders and the Patriots were two of the teams that were there. The Chiefs, I think, were a little bit closer to where the Ravens were, at about 20 million per. And these things sort of get around over the course of the couple of weeks leading up to free agency. So that's all it is. I mean, I think, again, like the Commanders and Patriots were planning pretty big swings at Ronnie Stanley. So, they sort of got left where they got left there after Ronnie makes the decision to stay in Baltimore, and then they turn around and they're able to get their left tackle and Laremy Tunsil.
I mean, it's obviously a great culture in Baltimore, something that you're hoping to change around here in D.C. It's something we talked about after the season they had last year. If the perception around here has changed that guys wouldn't come play here, do you feel like that has changed? Is this just a case that Stanley wanted to stay put, or was it something that he was still a little bit miffed at what Washington is?
I mean, I think Stanley and Chris Godwin are sort of similar in the sense that, like, they're both third contract guys, right? And, like, they both have made a lot of money. And when you already have a lot of money in the bank, doesn't mean you're not still chasing the next dollar. You are. I think you always are to some degree. But you might be willing to give up a little bit because you've already made some money, So I think that's probably what it was, and it's not like I haven't talked to him directly about this. I think that's probably part of it for Ronnie is, he's got a comfortable situation in Baltimore. They've been really good. They're going to continue to be really good. Being able to stay at the number he's able to stay at, he can trust that they're going to be able to take the savings there off of what he may have been able to make in a Washington or a New England and make the team around him better. So, really, I don't think it's any knock on anyone else. It was just, he's got a good situation. He's made a lot of money. And so, if it meant taking a little bit less, I think he was willing to take a little bit less to stay in that good situation. That said, I mean, I think Washington is a very attractive destination for teams right now. I don't think there's any question about that.
Albert Breer, senior NFL reporter and lead content strategist at the MMQB. So what they ended up doing at left tackle is actually maybe even better in terms of production, but man, did they pay a lot, right? Laremy Tunsil, and I mean comparatively speaking, they give up a 2, a 3, and a 4 with a 7 over the next 2 drafts. They did get a 4 back to help cushion the blow. And then they get Tunsil at 21 per against the cap for the next couple of years. He'll probably want an extension after this season, presumably. But if you would have gotten Stanley in this hypothetical at 24 and kept all your picks, I would have taken that. I do think Tunsil's a better player, but I want to get your thoughts on what they tried to do and what they ended up having to do, because Peters, who works in the shadows, seemed to go outside the box here.
Yeah, and I think it's like honestly, I think it's sort of reflective of how hard it is to fill that position if you don't have one. I mean, you see what the Chiefs had to do, which was bring in a guy who wasn't ever a full-time starter in San Francisco at $15 million a year. Dan Moore, who was about to be replaced in Pittsburgh, got $21 million a year in Tennessee. So it's a supply and demand thing. And that's one position where it's just really, really hard to find a guy who can be your long-term answer. And it's rare that they become available. So I think that the fact that they were able to get him at the price they were able to get him at was actually pretty good. I think that if you do like the draft value chart, whatever, it winds up equating to a low first-round pick, what they gave up to get him. And the opportunities the opportunity presented itself because of some stuff that happened in Houston, but I don't think he's a bad guy. Like, I think he'll come in and as long as you have the right culture around him, he'll be fine. It's a little bit like Trent Williams, and you guys can obviously relate to this, where there were a ton of questions about Trent when he was in Washington, right? And, then he gets to San Francisco, we haven't heard is anything bad about Trent Williams, So I think if you're Adam Peters, you sort of look at your own experience, having gone through that in San Francisco, where you traded for Trent Williams in early 2020, and Trent's going on 6 years now of All-Pro play out there in a really good environment. Now that the Pitt Commanders have that sort of environment, I think it gives them the freedom to take swings on opportunities like this with guys that look, not a bad guy, but might not be the leader of your program when you bring him in.
What have you made of their moves overall so far in free agency, some trades that they've made? I've probably been fine with just about everything they've done, except for maybe $15 million a year for Kinlaw. But what's your take on what they've done so far?
Yeah, I think the Kinlaw thing is, again, just sort of a guy who you view as a scheme fit, and a very specific role you're going to have for him. And, he hasn't lived up to his where he was drafted, of course, but he's still a good player, and you have an idea of what you're going to get from him, which is, sort of the way that they built the team last year and bringing all the guys that they had background with. And, I don't need to go through every name for you guys. You guys know all the names. But I think it's another one of those, you know what I mean? Where you do have an idea of what you're getting because Adam Peters was with the guy before and has experience, and there is some system familiarity there in what Kinlaw has done in the past. Outside of that, I think this is a good example what the Commanders have done. And it goes back to November when they traded for Lattimore, which was really a move for 2025 more than it was a move for 2024. Bringing in guys at premium positions in Lattimore and Debo and Laremy, Tunsil. And that happens because you did a good job in year one under Adam Peters and Dan Quinn and building the roster up and creating an environment where you don't have to press needs now. So when an opportunity comes along, you are loose enough to be able to take a swing on a guy like this. I think if they don't draft as well as they did last year and beyond just Jaden being able to get a Brandon Coleman, a Mikey Sanders-Still, a Johnny Newton, who they think is going to be something, a Luke McCaffrey, it does give you the freedom to take more chances and to do different things with some of your draft picks because you don't need the margin for error where you've got 10 or 12 picks and you need to fill 5 positions with starters.
Albert Breer getting us up to speed on the Commanders as we are now about an hour and 20 minutes away from the official league year starting.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, the shelves are already bare, I think, right?
I was going to say, I don't even know if that means anything anymore, but we're an hour and 20 minutes out. Before we let you go, we only have about 30 seconds, but I just want to get your thoughts really quickly as best you can sum it up. Is Trey Hendrickson still an option for Washington, and what would that market look like?
Yeah, the Bengals want a one, but I don't think the one's going to be out there for him because he's 31 years old and he's going to require a new contract. So I still don't think they would move him for anything less than a 2, though. So you have to make that determination if you're Washington, where you've already I don't have it in front of me, but they got what, a 1, a 2, a 4, a 6, and a 7 or something like that.
Exactly right. Yep.
Right. So you're looking at it if you're them and you're saying, do I really want to deplete myself of another draft pick? I think that's a question. And I think the other thing about it is, if you are the Commanders, you're probably looking at it and saying there's a really deep draft at that position. So we could draft guys with our first 2 picks and potentially hit on starting level players at that position at a much cheaper rate than flipping the 2 for Hendrickson. So I think it's something they consider. But I think there's a case to be made for just drafting and developing your own at that position too, based on what's in the draft class.
Albert, always appreciate your insight. Thanks for the time, man.
Awesome. Thanks, guys.
Be good. There's Albert Breer, SI, and MMQB on Grant and Danny here on The Fan.